Welcome back. A lot of news on Capitol Hill this week. Joining us back on Capitol Review is Mychael Schnell with our media partners at the Hill. And Mychael, first of all, thank you for joining us. Let's get right to it. This week in Washington was the U.S. Africa Leader Summit. Talk about the three-day summit and its importance.
Right. So this was a really significant event this week, that three-day summit, because it was the first time since 2014 that the White House had hosted a summit with African leaders. And so what came out of this three-day summit? First off, with the 50 African leaders who traveled to Washington for this summit, the U.S. agreed to a commitment of $55 billion in American spending in Africa over the next 3 years. So that was one significant outcome from this summit. They also agreed to dozens of business deals and other initiatives involving areas like technology, space, cybersecurity, and food security. And then another really interesting outcome from this three-day summit was that President Biden himself promised to return the favor of visiting a different country, and he promised to go and to visit Africa. This would be the first visit by a U.S. president to sub-Saharan Africa since 2015. He declined to say when it would actually happen, but just within itself, that was a significant development. So really an interesting 3 days of discussions and outcomes during that three-day summit in Washington.
Mychael, of course, you're well aware the Senate passed a bill to avert a government shutdown. Talk about the bill, but is it really only for a week?
Right. So this was just a continuing resolution, which means that current funding levels, which were fiscal year 2022 funding levels, those will continue for another week until December 23rd. And the real purpose of this is, A, to avert a government shutdown. The funding deadline was today at midnight, Friday at midnight. So that was a significant development. But even more than that, this gives congressional negotiators an extra 7 days to come to a consensus on full year funding. And when I say full year funding, that's an omnibus bill that would fund the government till the end of fiscal year 2023. So top appropriators have said that they do have an agreement for that omnibus bill, which would fund the government for the rest of fiscal year 2023. We have not yet seen details regarding that bill. So it'll, a lot of congressional lawmakers themselves and reporters are waiting to see what the actual nitty-gritty numbers are in that agreement. But as you mentioned, the continuing resolution, which President Biden is expected to sign shortly, that will avert tonight's government shutdown and give appropriators another 7 days to come to an agreement on full year spending.
And Mychael, a final public meeting will be held on Monday, December 19th on the January 6th committee. What are we expecting to hear?
The biggest outcome that we're expecting to see from this business meeting on Monday is a vote on criminal referrals. The January 6th committee has not yet said who will be the subject of those criminal referrals, which will be recommendations to the Department of Justice. But they have said that the committee, the reason why it's a business meeting and not a hearing is because the committee is going to vote on those criminal referrals. So there are a lot of people waiting to see what will come out of those, who will be the subject of them. There's also lingering questions of the group of Republican lawmakers who were subpoenaed by the January 6th committee and who did not comply with that subpoena and who did not offer testimony. So needless to say, there will be a lot of eyes on that business meeting Monday afternoon for the January 6th committee, particularly for those criminal referrals.